So it's just a quick update of the last Blockbusters episode I did on Deck the Halls. I kept saying Kim Davis. The actress's name is actually Kristen Davis, but I kept confusing her with Kim Cattrall because they were both on Sex and the City. As if it isn't painfully obvious, I have never seen Sex and the City because it clearly doesn't appeal to schlubs like me. Just wanted to make a little correction there. If anything, I think it's fair to say we can all blame MediaWiz or MC Swigga for that one. Enough about Deck the Halls. That movie sucks. Today we're here to talk about The Mean One, which also sucks.
Remember that story about Cindy You-Know-Who? When her Christmas was stolen, she knew what to do.
Why, Santa Claus? Why?
But what if I said that's not how it went down?
Monster!
You gonna be okay? Because we can turn around right now.
No. Poor girl. Her mother was killed. Her mind snapped.
Did you ever find the Christmas killer?
Never got a reliable description of the man.
The mean one. He's slippery. He's elusive. He's a mean one, that mister.
I'm not going to be a victim anymore. Time to roast this beast. You're a dead one, mister.
Time for yet another movie that says, let's take a nostalgic IP that's associated with a lot of people's childhoods and turn it into a gritty, edgy, violent recreation. This is going to be the big thing of the 2020s. I hope you're ready for more of this. It seems like they're never going to stop. Real talk, though. Would anybody be interested in seeing a horror movie version of Cat in the Hat? I mean, I don't mean like a re-edited version of the 2003 Mike Myers movie. I mean, same guys that did The Mean One, doing a slightly bigger budget version of something like this, but instead making it a horror version of Cat in the Hat. Even out of morbid curiosity, tell me you wouldn't be interested in seeing that. In a sleepy mountain town, Cindy witnesses the murder of her parents by a bloodthirsty green figure in a red Santa suit. 20 years later, the Christmas-hating monster begins to terrorize the town once more. Cindy finds a new purpose in stopping the creature and saving the holiday. When it comes to these kind of movies, I've talked about a couple of them before. The two that come to mind are obviously the Banana Splits movie, which was based on that old 70s Banana Splits show, and the one from earlier this year, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. And this one came in between. This was released in December 2022, and well, a lot of people associate it with Blood and Honey because they were both being announced around the same time, and it was, for a lot of people, sort of the first time they were seeing these nostalgic childhood IPs turn into violent, gritty horror movies. One of the funniest things about a lot of the written reviews was a lot of people said this had better production value than Blood and Honey, and say what you want about that movie, but I don't agree at all with that. I think this actually had slightly worse production value, and I even alluded to that when I mentioned this movie back when I did my review of Blood and Honey. Like I said in my Blood and Honey review, this kind of movie really depends on what your stance on the idea is. I mean, with Blood and Honey, you had people who were on board with the idea because, oh, they wanted to stick it to the fat cats at Disney, or, oh, they were on board with it because it sounded like such a stupid idea they were wanting to see how bad it could be. Or you had people who thought the idea was just stupid and shouldn't exist, or you had people who were like, no, it's an assault on my childhood, I don't want that. And overall thoughts, before we even talk about the movie itself, it is exactly the same as Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. It really depends on what your stance on this whole let's take nostalgic IPs and turn them into gritty, violent horror films is. If you're on board with it, then yeah, sure, check it out. If you're not, then by all means, avoid this movie at all costs. An important thing to point out is that out of the two, Winnie the Pooh is legally allowed to exist because the original Winnie the Pooh books went to the public domain. And as soon as that was announced, those people over at Jagged Edge Productions or Jagged Edge Films, whatever the studio's called, they jumped on the bandwagon right away to try and make a movie of that as soon as that was announced. However, this movie has to be categorized as a parody because, well, the Grinch is still legally owned by somebody. The original book rights are probably owned by Dr. Seuss's widow, and the rights to the cartoon and the movies, those are owned by, Warner Brothers or Universal. So this one has to be a parody. It took a lot of tiptoeing around certain things for them to actually make this movie without getting sued. Hence why they never say key words all throughout the movie. The big one obviously being Grinch. They never once say Grinch. The movie starts with the narrator, and thankfully this isn't one of those movies where they start and end the movie with narration and then just drop it entirely. This one actually has a narrator all throughout the movie, just like the live-action Jim Carrey Grinch, which it seems like that was what they were mostly parodying. Yeah, there's elements of the book, but for the most part, it seems like they are trying to go after the Jim Carrey Grinch movie as their source of inspiration.
Remember that story about Cindy You-Know-Who? When her Christmas was stolen, she knew what to do.
So like I said, the movie starts with the narrator who's telling us the story of a young Cindy You-Know-Who. Yeah, that's one of the many clever workarounds they had to do to, legally get away with this movie. So it's a parody. It's not Cindy Lou Who, it's Cindy You-Know-Who. And she's a little girl. She comes down, sees what she thinks is Santa Claus trying to take the Christmas tree, and they just kind of speed through everything. She kisses him on the cheek, and that makes his heart grow 3 sizes. But then Cindy's mother enters the scene and sees that it's a monster in a Santa suit, tries to fight it. The monster kills her mother, and then it flees into the night, and then we jump forward 20-something years later. After all these years, Cindy has become traumatized by the entire thing, and she's even hesitant to come back to the town, which is now renamed Newville. Again, one of the many clever workarounds here. As advised by a therapist, which we don't even see, although funny enough, Blood and Honey had the exact same thing. The main girl gathered her friends to go to a cabin in the woods because her therapist said it would do her good to get out. And I guess it would be really funny if it was the exact same therapist that told Cindy to go back to the town. So she goes back to town with her father, Lou, and the town has totally changed. Nobody has Christmas ornaments, no one has Christmas lights, decorations, there are no Christmas carolers. The town is barren, and it seems like the population number is dropping very, very frequently, but no one really knows why. Everyone knows that there was some kind of killer on the loose on the night of Cindy's mom's murder, but no one believes that it was the mean one, that it was a Grinch. Because the drawing that young Cindy gives to the police officer in the flashback, first of all, it doesn't really look like the Grinch. It looks more like an alien in a Santa suit. Legal reasons, gotta tap dance around that, so that's supposed to be what he looks like, according to this little girl's drawing description. People know that there was a murder on the loose, they just don't know it was a monster that did it. And so when Cindy comes back to this town with her dad, the first thing you establish is that there's a guy, roughly around her age, who also doesn't celebrate Christmas, but that's because he's Jewish.
Gotcha. This is what I'm talking about gotchaing. It's homemade matzo ball soup.
You made this?
Proudly Jewish.
At one point he starts singing the dreidel song like nothing, but when it comes to Christmas songs, he has to make up comedy lyrics.
Dashing through the snow, something about a sleigh. Oreos don't go, laughing all the way. Bells on Bobby Bob.
So after meeting up with Officer Love Interest, they then go back to their old house and talk about trying to put up some Christmas decorations to get back into the season and help Cindy get past her trauma. You also establish some other characters like the police chief, who I mentioned earlier, who in the flashback kind of looked like, that's what he kind of looked like in the flashback.
Can you redraw the man you saw?
And speaking of which, Officer Love Interest, he kind of looked like a slightly younger version of Zach Braff from Scrubs. It was a fun game to be playing all throughout the movie. It's like, who does this person kind of look like? So every time somebody looks like an actually famous person, take a drink if you can name what they look like to you. And they also establish a corrupt mayor, except this time it's different from the Jim Carrey one because the mayor is a woman. Her name is Mayor McBean, which I think that's supposed to be a Dr. Seuss book reference. There's a couple of those scattered throughout the movie as well. There's a part where they go to a bar and they superimpose a sign on the bar and it says Hortons. Get it? That night, Cindy and her dad start putting up Christmas decorations, and then when Cindy goes out to take out the trash, Next thing she knows is that her father has been maliciously killed by something, and of course she knows that it's the titular mean one. And at first she thinks that this is all just a bad dream, but then she wakes up in the hospital, she has blood on her hands, and the mayor, officer love interest, and some nurse are talking about what they think happened. And of course they all try to shrug off when she says that it was the thing, the Christmas killer is back.
What if it's coming for me? What if it's coming for all of us?
It's okay. It's okay, sweetie.
No, it's not okay. Are you insane?
If there's anything I can give this movie, at least their hospital room set actually looked like a hospital room, and they didn't pull some After Last Season shit where it looked like they were just filming in someone's guest room.
How did he feel about the MRI?
He thought it was pretty loud.
After this scene, Cindy goes wandering in the mountains for a little bit, trying to do some hiking, getting some fresh air. And of course, when she goes up to the mountain just outside of town, that's when she sees the monster lurking around and killing some campers. And it's here where we see what the thing looks like. And it's low budget, it looks like crap, but you know what? I think if anything, the mean one himself, the performance saves it. He's played by the same guy who plays Art the Clown in the Terrifier movies. And I would say that it is kind of cool to see him in a Christmas horror movie, but there's a much better one on the way because they're making a third Terrifier movie that's set around Christmas time. So honestly, you should probably watch that instead. I'm trying to be fair. If anything, he was probably the best performance in the whole movie. Although the one thing that does kind of suck is that he doesn't say any lines. He says one thing at the end, but he doesn't have any kind of quips or one-liners, which is honestly what I was kind of expecting. I mean, you're parodying the Jim Carrey Grinch. Have him make some corny jokes like a poor man's Freddy Krueger. It would have been cheesy, but it would have been something. I guess they were trying to stay more in tune with his Art the Clown character. And I mean, the guy is very mime-like. You know, he's good at having exaggerated expressions, and you know, he's very good at physical performances. But all throughout the movie, Cindy keeps trying to get the cops on her side, and Officer Love Interest believes her, but the police chief doesn't. And again, this is one of those horror movies where it's such a small town, there's only two cops, and of course one believes them and the other one doesn't. Throughout the movie she keeps going to them and telling them what's going on, but Officer Love Interest thinks she's crazy but slowly starts to warm up to her because, of course, but the police chief just keeps trying to brush it off like, oh, you're crazy, it was no monster. Even as they're hauling off some of the campers into an ambulance, she shows a very blurry picture of the mean ones skulking around in the woods, and he says, oh, what is this supposed to be, Bigfoot? And he even says Hellboy.
I have proof.
What is this? Hellboy?
Eventually Cindy goes to the local bar, and it's here where she meets up with this character nicknamed Doc, and he is this old, kind of Santa Claus looking guy. He's the crazy old man in the town who is rambling about the monster, but no one believes him. But of course, what he's describing is exactly what Cindy has seen. It's here where you get to the most egregious part where they try to tap dance around saying what they actually want to say, because he starts going into this huge tirade about what this thing is, and they even quote the, everyone in Newville loved Christmas a lot, but that thing, that beast, the mean one does not, or something like that. And here's where you get them trying to get around saying the thing, because he says, he's a mean one, that mister, and then the bartender slaps an order down on the table. Finch? Yeah, order for Mike Finch.
What is it?
Finch! Order from Mike Finch!
So that's their workaround having to actually say Grinch. And I hope you like moments like that, because there's a bunch of that all throughout the movie. Oh, and I also gotta mention, Doc is just this guy's nickname, because then they establish his full name is like Eucharia Zeus or something like that. So then later on, you can have a character actually say out loud, Dr. Zeus.
Matthias! Mr. Dr. Zeus!
Even though she still has that old drawing that looks like a stereotypical green alien man in a Santa suit, he whips out a professional sketch of what the thing looks like, and they're not even trying to hide the fact that it's clearly like a traced sketch of the Jim Carrey Grinch. Like if you look up stock images of the Jim Carrey Grinch, there's the one where he has his arms to his side and he's like pouting angrily. It's clearly that image. They just traced it.
Looks like this.
I guess at this point in the movie, they figured they didn't have that many kills, so they had to try and speed things up. So there's a scene where, at a completely different restaurant, in the middle of the day, or like mid-morning or something, you have a van full of rowdy assholes donned in tacky Santa suits and Christmas outfits, and the side of the van says SantaCon. So all these people rush out. They seem like they're drunk or just really obnoxious because one of the guys starts to try and make advances towards the waitress.
I think I'll take an iced tea.
Do you want your iced tea sweet?
Oh, how about regular? I got a feeling if you lick the ice cube, it'll be sweet up, boys! Come back here! All right.
Then she goes to the back to try and get the drinks, and then he like tries to wrap his arms around her, and then she just like nudges him away, and then next thing you know, oh, his neck is slit and he's dying in the freezer. And then the Grinch just shows up and attacks everybody. While some of the gore is okay for a low-budget horror movie, this is just one of the many times where they clearly use fake blood from like stock videos. Like if you look up green screen blood splatters on YouTube, it looks like that. And they use this a lot throughout the movie, and it's like, man, that's some To Boldly Flee shit, dude. Come on. This is what I was talking about earlier when people said this had better production than Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. It's like, man, that movie also had some lame-ass CG gore in it, but you know what? When they had some decent practical effects, they were at least decent. Way more than this one, anyway. Oh, and there's also a part when one of the people the Grinch kills in the sequence, he stomps on their head and then it cracks open and it splatters. You can clearly tell the actor is just putting his foot on top of a wig with like fake blood underneath it. They didn't even go to the full mile of like trying to fill up a fake head made of plaster with like Kool-Aid or whatever and then stomp it on the ground. They didn't even try with that. You eventually figure out what Doc's connection to the monster is. He goes into a backstory about how his wife went to deliver some Christmas presents off at the post office.
Thing cut her down in the parking lot.
Like I said, it's some Birdemic level shit, but at least Birdemic was made with the intention of being treated seriously, so that's what makes it kind of funny to watch. This entire movie, you can tell that they were trying to be tongue-in-cheek and self-aware, and it's like, I don't know. I mean, I've seen way too many of these kind of movies, so that novelty is kind of worn off. I can definitely see people who are more into these kind of movies enjoying that. But me personally, I've seen way too many of these like, we're making a bad movie on purpose, haha, isn't the bad gore special effects funny? Isn't the overacting funny? It's like, yeah, a little bit, but then it starts to wear out its welcome after a while, especially for an hour-and-a-half movie. Although I will say this, the movie did feel short. That's one of the silver linings here. It did feel like it went by fast. Officer Love Interest goes into the mountains to see what's going on, and of course he comes face to face with the monster, but he's able to give it the slip. Oh, and also in the scene where he's sneaking around the cave, you see a dog plushie with an antler taped to it. So that's the closest thing to his pet dog Max you're going to get in this thing. I'm just saying, hypothetically, imagine if Universal or some big budget studio was actually legally allowed to make an authorized horror Grinch movie. Wouldn't it have been awesome if, like, his pet dog Max was, like, this big, ferocious hellhound that's going around mauling people? Wouldn't that have been cool? But, I think because of their budget, they were like, nah, fuck it, we can't do that. So instead, they just had a little dog plushie with an antler on it, and it's like, oh, that's supposed to be Max. There you go. So that's another thing that people remember from the original. Officer Love Interest manages to give the monster the slip with the help of Doc, who they also show has a trunk full of guns in his car. But he goes back to Cindy. They talk for a little bit. They're clearly getting closer. And then Cindy has a dream sequence where they're having a sex scene in her shower, and you know, there's no nudity or anything. The entire time I was just thinking, wow, and to think, I gave The Fog from 2005 shit. This is somehow worse than that. And it ends with the Grinch showing up and killing Officer Love Interest, and then Cindy wakes up. She says that she's not going to be a victim anymore. And then she goes into a training montage of her trying to prep for finally killing this thing off. She goes full Laurie Strode in the 2018 Halloween movie. And there's even points in the dialogue where she says things like, you know, we're going to kill this thing tonight. And I was like, oh, fuck. You're giving me flashbacks to Halloween Kills, the non-stop dialogue of evil dies tonight, he must die tonight. Anyway, in the third act, they start to speed things up a little bit more. The mayor becomes more of a crucial player because they establish her being kind of a corrupt politician who's hiding something. And it's finally revealed that they treat this like it's some kind of big twist, but there's a website that's advertising people to go hiking near that mountain, and then Officer Love Interest looks into it because he finds a bunch of wallets from people who have been killed up in the mountain, and he's like, yeah, this website, it's managed by the mayor. And it's like, yeah, it's a travel ad to try and get people to come to the town. Kind of figured that it would be run by whoever's in charge, like the mayor. So it's like they're using this travel ad as a way to try and lure people to be sacrifices to try and keep the monster at bay from attacking the town during Christmas.
This website's telling people to hike new mountains, but they're blocking their IP address, so I kept digging and digging, and guess what I found? This website is run by Mayor McBean.
And I thought, shit, isn't this the plot to Willy's Wonderland? That was the basic plot, that the officials were trying to lure people from out of town who, in their eyes, were out-of-towners and they deserve to die. And they would sacrifice them to the local monsters so that they didn't attack the town. This movie really could have used Nicolas Cage. I'm just saying, Nicolas Cage versus Art the Clown donned in a Grinch costume, that probably would have saved the movie. Another scene where, I'm assuming it's supposed to be the same bar that we saw earlier, Horton's. There's a guy who's running the place, and he gets a delivery of what he thinks are peppers, but then he opens it up and it's a bunch of Christmas stuff. And that lures out the mean one to come and kill this guy, and he slashes him up with a butcher's cleaver. Eventually, the police chief, who seems like he's been trying to cover all this up, eventually he reveals that he knew all about this.
Stephanie?
So he is now on their side. All the while, the mayor is trying to get out of town, you know, just until after New Year's, in her own words. But then there's a scene where she ends up getting killed. Again, just like the main bad guy police chief who was orchestrating everything in Willy's Wonderland. Starts experiencing car trouble. She tries to fix it. The mean one shows up, kills her by slamming her head into the trunk. And then it shows, like, her severed head, and I think there's like a vote for me sticker or whatever on her forehead or on her mouth or something. Cindy is preparing to fight this guy with a bunch of Christmas-themed booby traps laid out, as well as, you know, she has several guns at her disposal. They showed her doing like push-ups and punching a punching bag and stuff like that. Eventually, Doc gives her the information that Officer Love Interest is up in the mountains trying to take him out with some guns. But of course, he ends up getting attacked. He gets his foot stuck in a bear trap that the mean one laid out for him. Officer Police Chief sacrifices himself while everybody else makes a getaway. They're able to get Officer Love Interest, you know, somewhere safe. All the while, Cindy and Doc have some kind of battle strategy laid out. You know, Cindy has a bunch of Christmas stuff all throughout her home. The Grinch shows up to try and attack her, but then she gets up, starts beating the shit out of him, whips out a candy cane shotgun, and it's here where they do more of that. Like she goes, "You're a dead one, mister," gunshot to cut off saying Grinch.
You're a dead one, mister.
Doc ends up getting hurt at one point. Like the mean one shows up outside and attacks him, but he's not dead. He's just critically wounded. And then here's where we get the ultimate M. Night Shyamalan twist ending. He has him on the floor and she's ready to finally just kill him for good. Then she notices that he still has a little Santa Claus necklace that they showed she gave him in the beginning when she was just a little girl. So why did he hold on to that for so long? Well, we then go into flashback, And then it reveals that her mom wasn't actually killed by the Grinch. Her mom accidentally slipped and she got her head impaled on something. And the Grinch didn't mean to do it, and it shows him looking all horrified, like, oh no, I didn't mean to do that. And then he looks over at Cindy, and Cindy misconstrues the whole thing, and she goes, monster! And then it shows, like, he goes from sad to angry, so he just became even more bitter and resentful after this horrible misunderstanding.
Monster!
And she says, I'm sorry that all this happened, I forgive you. She kisses him on the cheek again, and then his heart grows 3 sizes too big, because then his heart explodes out of his chest and he dies.
I forgive you. So the monster is stopped. Okay. And then we jump forward the next year and we see that with the creature gone, they can now use the mean one as a way to try and get people out to visit the town.
So the mean one say yeah!
This is another government conspiracy to distract us so they can raise our taxes.
Now, I'm from the country, y'all. I have no problem going out in the woods to try to find this guy.
So the movie ends with Cindy and Officer Love Interest getting together, and Doc is still alive, and, you know, they all wish each other a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. They say one line of that Dares Forest Dahu song from the Grinch.
Yahoo Dory.
And then the movie ends on a cliffhanger because then, you know, as they're panning out and you see the town's lights from down below, the narrator says something like, oh yes, there was so much holiday cheer. Well, that is until next year. And then you hear a growl off in the distance, cuts to black, and then the credits roll.
And so ends our story with holiday cheer. And they all lived happily ever after. Well, at least till next year.
The reason that the movie exists is because him and his crew, they were, you know, working on a commercial or something, and they had a bunch of spare time and a bunch of leftover Christmas props, so they decided as a goof they would make a gag trailer for a Grinch horror movie, not intending for it to be a real movie, and then after showing it to a bunch of people, they said, hey, yeah, you should totally make that a real movie. And I'm pretty sure I said the exact same thing about the Banana Splits movie, even though that's not actually what it was. But after finding that out, I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. So I think at the end of the day, it really depends on what mood you're in. I mean, if you're one of those people that says, no, I love the original Grinch cartoon and the Jim Carrey Grinch, yeah, the idea of a Grinch horror movie is just an assault on my childhood, then yes, by all means, do not watch it. This movie is very dumb and very bad. At the same time, though, if you like low-budget schlock horror movies and you like watching them to either laugh at them or to be like, oh, well, you know, just a bunch of people having fun making a movie, then yeah, I'd say at least give it a shot. It really, I feel the same way about this that I did the Winnie the Pooh one. It's like, it's not good, and I really don't see myself watching it at all anytime soon, but, I mean, I sat through it. I mean, really, this is the kind of movie that is perfect for Blockbusters show. It's low budget, it's silly, it's dumb. Acting is mediocre at best. I mean, people were clearly trying, but the best performance in this was from the guy doing the Grinch, and he didn't even say a single line of dialogue the whole movie. The entire time, even when I was laughing at some of the things in the movie, the entire time it just felt like watching a fake trailer extended to an hour and a half. All the while, effects that you'd see from 2012 YouTube game reviews, like fake blood splats and whatnot, were going on. It's like, okay. Really, if you're gonna stick with a Grinch movie, just stick with the original cartoon. And if you like the Jim Carrey one, which I did, I really like the Jim Carrey one, fine.
then yeah, go ahead, watch those movies. So tune in next time to the Blockbuster Show. We have just one more video this month, and it's going to be a little bit early. It's not going to be on New Year's Day, but we're going to be talking about yet another ensemble rom-com movie from Gary Marshall. Last time we talked about a movie that was like this. It wasn't actually from Gary Marshall, but it was similar in the vein of movies like those. It was What to Expect When You're Expecting, but this time we're going to be doing New Year's Eve, which was the spiritual successor to a movie I already didn't like, Valentine's Day. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. Until then, guys, I'm Adam Sykes of the Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.
Danger! Danger!